Hello, and welcome to this Revizto webinar, linking Revizto to an asset register. I'm John Saint, and I'm one of the customer success managers for Northern Europe here at Revizto. What we will cover in this session includes creating stamps for different assets, creating cert sets for each asset type, using Selection Inspector to add stamps to assets, generate asset register from data, copy links to assets, adding QR codes to that asset register. And the last thing we'll touch on is how all of this comes together. We'll look at the asset register, click on the links that we've created or the QR codes that we created and see how quickly we can access Revizto. We'll also touch on some of the features themselves within Revizto and the chat log so we can start adding documents and also photos or even comments within there. The real value you get out of this is that connection between Revizto and your asset register. You can quickly open up your asset register, want to see where that item is spatially, click on the link that we set up during this session, and then jump straight to that element. Additionally, what you could see is those documents attached to it. So any O&Ms, any drawings, any specifications, they could all be linked to that issue. So it's a very quick, easy way to access your data associated to your assets. Before we jump in to the product itself, I want to touch on some of the features that you'll see throughout. Some of them are going to be existing and some of them were something we're going to see from 5.14. And this first slide, custom workflows is a new feature that we have. If you look on the left, you're all familiar, anyone that's used Revizto, with that standard workflows. And that standard workflow is consistent across all of Revizto. It goes through open, in progress, solved, and closed. We had some feedback from our customers and we understood that we need a bit more control over that, a bit more customization. So with 5.14, within the workspace, you can actually create your own custom workflows. Installation RFI on the right of the screen, there are examples, and you can see within those types that we have, we no longer have open, in progress, solved, or closed. We have a bunch of other ones. And this is completely customized per project. We're going to leverage this during this session. We're going to start touching on how we create those for those specific assets so they're distinguished from those standard workflows or those clashes or observation workflows. So with the custom workflows, we have two options to manage them. We have to go into the workspace to create them, but in the desktop, we can make modifications to the existing stamps and apply the workflows to those stamps. We have a new tab available to us in the workspace, issue workflows, and in here we can create the new workflows that we desire. In addition to the custom workflows, we also have QR codes that have come with 5.14. In this version, we can create QR codes for specific elements or issues within our issue tracker, and we could be specific on what those outputs look like, whether they're A4 sheets or stickers. With those, we can also select what is going to be focused on and what is shown when a QR code has been scanned from the Revizto website app, which we'll go into a bit more detail during this presentation. To round it out, we'll be touching on cert sets, which we'll use to find the assets that we want to add stamps to. Selection Inspector, how we export that data out. If we haven't got an asset register, how we export the data that we have available to us in Revizto. Issue tracker links, using the issue tracker to export links so we can add them to our asset register. Stamp creation, how we use the stamps and the metadata available to us to apply stamps to those assets, and then also reporting off the back of it. That's the end of the PowerPoint portion of the presentation. We'll now jump into Revizto and I'll give you a demonstration of how we set all of this up. So the first thing we're going to do is go into the workspace, and that is at ws.revizto.com. When you're in here, you'll have your licenses. So within this drop down, you can go to your desired license and then you'll get to this project level. Within the project, we can select the project here, or we can go through and actually select the project here. Once we're in here, we're going to see this new tab, Issue Workflows. Something to note is that the workflows you create are specific to the project and they're not license level. So if you did want to recreate this, you'd have to recreate it on each of those individual projects. We're going to jump into the issue workflow and then we're going to start building this out ourselves. If we scroll down, this is what you'll see if you've not accessed this before. We can go in here and click edit. And within this edit function, with the standard workflow specifically, we can't make any changes to that workflow. So this workflow is always going to be available to every project you have. What we can do is add another type in there. So if you wanted to follow the same open, in progress, solve, closed, but you wanted to add it to a different type. So let's say you wanted to do a clash closeout or clash test, you could add that, create a new type in here, and then just apply it to it. So you'll see that a lot throughout this. What we're going to do is start from the beginning and then create a new workflow. And I'm going to call this one asset management. Could add a description in here if you wanted to add a bit more detail, but we're just going to leave it blank for now. We're going to hit create. And just like we saw in the standard workflow, we have these two panels. This one, we can add a bit more detail. We can change the description. We can change the name even after we're happy with it. These will get updated automatically. The issue types is what we touched on. We could add this specific workflow we create here into a bunch of different issue types. And then this is actually where we modify it. You can see how this has changed. We've got the delete option here. So we're going to start using that in a minute. The first thing we're going to do is pull down here, go to add status, and we're going to create our own statuses. So the first one would be in use, and that's going to be a new status. We're going to add that in. We could add a description in here. Again, we're going to select a category, and we're going to use that as the to-do. So that's going to be the top level default for this. We're going to then change the color. So if we go down here, we're going to set that as orange. We're going to change the background to gray, and then we're going to hit add. Once that's done, it's going to tell you that it's added up at the top right. We're going to pull that up, and then we're going to shift what open is to a different status. So you can see these categories, these are both to do. So what I can do is close this one down, and I can push that one into in use. And you can see how that's updated within here. So every time we create a new issue or stamp underneath this, it will always be in use as default. We're then going to replace some of the additional ones, and we can really add as many as we want within here, but we're going to just add a few for this case. We're going to go in and then add it repaired, pop that in as new status, add that down. Description again, we can add, and we're going to put this as tracking. We're going to change this to orange, and then we're going to change this to gray, like this, and add that in. We can then pull that up. We can delete in progress, and then we can change that to repaired, and we can do that again. We're going to add one more. I'm going to go in here and add in not functioning, new status, add this in, add a category in here. Again, it's going to be tracking, and we're going to pop that as gray, and then we're going to set that as red. So we can pick that up really easily. And then we're going to change this from solved, and we're going to do the exact same thing, pull it down and put it as not functioning. We always need to have a closed version of this, but typically for this, the only reason you're going to close it is if that piece of equipment has been removed. So we're just going to leave closed as is for now. I noticed that I've made this one orange, so what I can actually do is go into the edit function, change the text, and go to green there. Then the next step is to add this to a type. So a type is separate to what the workflow is. So a workflow has been created, and that has a name, which is that asset management. A type is what type of issue the status is coming under. So we can call it the exact same thing, asset management. And we'll pop it to green. Let's say we want to go for this icon, so we can actually go down here, click on the icon. We can also give it a color. Let's say it's green, and then we've got an asset management one there. We could set this issue type as default, and that'll replace any of the stamps that you've created already, or even before the 5.14 update, with this type as default. Typically, you're not going to do this unless you really want to change that standard workflow. So we're just going to leave it ticked for now, and then hit save, and then we can start moving over to stamps. To access the stamps, we have to just click on this icon, issue settings, right next to issue workflows, and we're just going to click on that there. From here, we can manage the stamps categories and also the stamps within those categories. So a category is a way of managing your stamps. So if we go down to general tags, you can see all these stamps are sitting within that stamp category. What we can also do is manage the tags. So these are going to be any sort of metadata you want to add. You can add these to drawings, you can add these to your stamps. We can create these in here as well. If we go back to stamps, we can then create our own category first. So if we go create stamp category, and we're going to call this one 15 asset management, and hit OK. And if we scroll down, we can see asset management's there. Once we click on it, we've got the option to create stamp template from here, but you always have an option to hit the plus sign at the top. We're going to hit create stamp template. And now we have two options in terms of how we do this for asset management. We could first create an abbreviation for assets, and we could just call this assets, and we could do it that way, and we could have our own individual one for all the assets we have within the project. But my solution, which I recommend, is to create these for each individual item. So we call this one fan coil unit or FCU, and we'll type fan coil unit in here. And then we create multiple different stamps for their specific needs. The benefits of this is that you can apply data to this stamp. You can also filter these out easily within the issue tracker just by their stamp name. Additionally, when you use those filters in the model, you'll be able to identify what those assets are without having to go into detail and find them specifically. Instead of investigating the data to see which sort of asset it is, you can use the abbreviations and the stamps to quickly identify what they are. At the bottom here, we can select a category at default. If we've got one selected, as we have here, asset management, it's going to default to that. We could go in and add it to a different category if we wanted to, but we're just going to leave as is. We can also create a new one. So if you just want to go start from fresh and just create a stamp, we can just create a category under for it to sit under. We're just going to hit OK here. And this is where we can start populating the data that we have. So we're going to go into type, and we're going to add a type in here, and we're going to call it asset management. So that's coming from those issue workflows that we've created ourselves. So now that type sits within it. Where we've got in use, repaired, not functioning, that's all going to be available under that type. We can then add a color, which I'm going to make green because it matches with the type. The abbreviation we can update, the title we can update, but we're going to leave as is. You can make changes to these. Once you do apply these stamps, you can make changes to each individual stamp. Not that everyone wants to do that. They might want to keep it standardized, but you can go in and make changes. For example, you could add additional data to that fan coil unit title to say what fan coil it is if you're using an asset identifier or tag. We can then add a priority. We could leave this as a major priority. This could vary depending on the significance of that piece of equipment. For a luminaire, for example, you might want to put that as a trivial one or a minor issue. But it's up to you how you leverage this. Deadlines, we can leave as is. Assignee, so if there's a specific person that has to look at these fan coil units, we could assign it to a specific person. So I'm going to assign it to myself just for this case. If you've got a mechanical engineer that needs to see these quite frequently, you could assign it to them. We can then add watchers as well, and we can make this public or private. So if we made it private, only the person creating those stamps will be able to see them. But if we keep it public, we can share with the whole project. Then, as I talked about before with the tags, we could add additional metadata tags within here. I'm only going to create one for now. You can make as many of these you want. As I said, AHU for an air handling unit, luminaire, LMU for a luminaire. It's really up to you how many of these create. This is the workflow I would suggest and is one we recommend. Next thing we're going to touch on is actually open up Revizto itself. I quickly set up an additional stamp. It's more to align with the project itself. What you can do, and I did this very quickly, by just duplicating the stamp out, changing the name to HRU, Heat Recovery Unit, added that in, and it copies all that data from the fan coil unit into that new version. So Heat Recovery Unit, it'll have the exact same priority there, the assignee, public, watchers, whatever you may add. I did this specifically for the template project we're working on. So now we're going to open up Revizto, and we're just going to be in a standard 3D view and navigating around the model. If I go up here and click on the stamps, I can see if I scroll down, 15 asset management, fan coil unit, heat recovery unit. So those two that we've created within the workspace have been automatically updated and refreshed within the Revizto app. If I go into the settings of these, as well, and we scroll down, we go to 15 fan coil unit. It's got all that data associated to it, same as the heat recovery unit, except for the color has changed. So now we've got the stamps created and we know they're in the desktop app. We're going to close this out, hit X here to get out of that stamp UI, and then we're going to search for specific items within the object tree. We can search for anything in here. So what we're going to do is search for heat recovery unit. Just search heat recovery, and then when I hit enter, that's going to find all those elements. If I then go right click and click isolate, it's going to isolate all those elements. So what we want to do, instead of being able to go in here and search those all the time, we want to be able to save out that search set. So I'm going to close that down. I'm going to click on an item, and then I'm going to go into the properties. We can go from properties in here. So if you right click, show properties, it'll do the exact same thing and pull up this panel. We're then going to navigate down, and we're going to start leveraging this data that we have to create a search set. Your search sets are these two buttons at the top, find objects and search set. What you're going to see when you first open this up, and typically within Revizto, is you're going to have something like this, where these two things are stacked from left to right. What I'd recommend, if you grab at the top, pull it down, you can stack those on top of each other. And that's because these two work in conjunction with each other. If we clear that one out, the find objects is where you build the search set, and then within the search set is where you save it. Within search sets, you can create folders and import and export, and also share the search sets you create. We're not going to create folders here. We're just going to keep this very simple. So once we have these two open, we can do it without having them open. It will automatically open anyway. If I go down into the, let me select another one of these. If I go back down into these and go to Revit type, I'm going to start leveraging a specific piece of information that I know is going to be on each one of these. And we know for sure that heat recovery unit is going to always be active on each of these heat recovery units. So I'm going to right click on here, and then I'm going to create new search. And what that's going to do is add that item as a searchable data field. So you can see heat recovery unit has to be included in name within the Revit type category. So now if I find all, it's going to find all those elements that we already selected via the object tree. But the beauty of this is we can save this out. So if I click on this button at the top here, save as new search set, and call this heat recovery units. We're not going to choose a folder for this, so we're just going to hit OK. And then we've got all our heat recovery units selected. Now we have this search set. We can always go back to it if we want to. So if I go back to the home, it's going to take a few seconds to load. And then we're back in here. What we can do is go back into the search set, and you'll see at the top here, if we select on another one, it'll update this as we go through. So we're going to go on heat recovery units, double click that, right click again and go to isolate. We can jump back to that selection whenever we want to and see the properties associated to those elements. You will note on the left here, if we select on a specific element, we've got these hearts next to our properties. And this is because it's part of our favorite. And if we highlight over something, you can see those two elements come up, and we can create our own preset within here. So if we go in here, create preset, and this is going to come invaluable later when we start exporting the data. We're going to call this heat recovery unit. Okay, and we can switch between these whenever we want. So if you've got a specific discipline or a specific piece of equipment, we can update these and use one that works for that and the properties that are relative to that. Obviously, you might have different native formats that this is coming from, so the data might be all over the place. Different disciplines might apply data in different locations, so you can create as many as you like to make sure the pop-up and the data that comes off the back of it is relevant to the element. So we've got this, and then what we're going to do is come in here, and then we're going to find additional data that we want to add to it. For example, I want to add the width, add to favorites, and then that's going to be popped to the top, add to favorites, and then add to favorites, width, length, height. Then I'm also interested in the voltage, add to favorites. I then also want to include the omniclass number, add favorites as well. So now when we highlight over an element, we can see all that data associated to it. What we can do from here is then go into our selection inspector, and as you can see, every favorite we've got at the top there is across our property favorites too. So if I added another one in here, let's say it's on that layer, add to favorites, we pull this across a little bit. Let's close down our find objects, pull this across a bit more, And you can see that layer has been added. If I remove that, it's going to remove it as well. So we're just going to add that back in so it's included so we know what level it's on. Now we've got those properties set up. We're going to go back into our search sets and then we're going to double click on our elements. And now we have all our elements available on that search set with all those parameters already filled in. We can then click on this button and then we can create stamps for those items. So we're going to create multiple stamps. We have the option to create individual stamps, but we're going to create multiple because we have multiple selected. So I'm going to click on create multiple stamps. I'm then going to scroll down and find the stamp that we created. I could of course come in here and type in HRU and that's going to pull up that stamp specifically. So if you know what it's called, we can just search for it. It's then going to come up with a pop-up to say, do you want to create 37 stamps? And we can create 37 stamps. And those stamps are going to be created and we're going to have them in the issue tracker. The filter, we're just going to reset that out so we get an idea of where they are. What we can do within the filter itself is go in and create our own custom filter. We don't care about the status category, so we're just going to X that out, but we are interested in the stamp. All the different stamps we have available to us at the moment in the project, we can then select the one heat recovery unit that we're interested in. If we wanted to, within the custom filters, we could add additional items to this. For example, we could add priority and have the major items within there as well, and we can add additional data and filters within here. I'm just going to use the stamp because that's going to find all our heat recovery units. I'm then going to save this out. So the filters we create in the custom filter, if we save them out here and we want to pop it into the presets, we're just going to call this heat recovery units. And we hit OK. Now within our presets, and we go down to the bottom, heat recovery units there. We can select on that whenever we want to, and it's always going to filter those down. So if I go FR demo, it's going to filter those out, and if I go to heat recovery units, it's going to filter all those out. The beauty of this filter as well is that it filters the 3D view and the stamps that are in the 3D view. If we didn't have any of these on, so if I reset the filter, you can see all the stamps that are associated to the project. And this goes back to the fact that we use different ones for different pieces of equipment. So heat recovery units, it's just going to filter those out. So if I'm looking for something specifically, I can go into these presets, filter out those stamps, and just find those heat recovery units. Once these issues are created, we have multiple options in terms of how we use the issue tracker for these. We have a chat which covers how the issue has changed. For example, we updated the status previously. If we wanted to change this to repaired, you can see this is actually updated within in the chat. We can go to not functioning, and this is updated as well. As it's on the same minute, it's all been put under 354. But if I did this in a minute's time, that's going to be updated as well. So you have an audit trail of this item. In the chat as well, we can also add files, and then photos, if we've got photos, and if we click this button here and you're in your mobile app, it'll actually open up your camera and you can just take a photo and it will just jump straight in. And now we've got the stamps added. We know the equipment is in the 3D space. Now let's create a quick asset register. Again, this might be external and you might be creating the links directly, but we can actually use the data that we have in Revizto to create an asset register for us. So I'm going to close this down and go straight into 3D. I'm again going to leverage the selection inspector. I'm going to select all the heat recovery units, and in here I'm going to select all the items. What I'm going to do from here is then export to CSV at the top. Once we select that, we're going to save this out as asset register as a CSV. We're going to hit save. That's going to open up, and then I'm going to double click on that and we're going to open up the asset register. Now all our information is exported out into a CSV. We can explore this, use any sort of formulas we want. What we can do within here is start adding additional field column headers. So we're going to call this one Revizto link, and we're going to call this one Revizto QR. The QR code is an example of how we can pull the QR codes into the asset register. And if we're using a desktop at the same time as our mobile app, we could give this a quick scan, and that'll take us directly to the element in the model, which we can then in real time with our phones navigate to the piece of equipment on site. Now we have those two items in. We've got authoring tool ID is the key item we're looking for. I'm just going to quickly create a filter here, filter this down, and do this from smallest to largest so we can easily access the one we're looking for. And then I'm going to jump back into Revizto. We're still in the 3D view, which we can click on one of these items. It's going to take us to the issue tracker. So if I go in here, it's going straight to the issue tracker, and we see the issues within here. Once I've done this, what I want to do is come up here and copy link. That's the first step, but it'll make sense once I show you the rest. And then in the actual issue itself that we're interested in, there's the little one with a down arrow. As you can see, if we go into 3D, only that one item is selected, and that's saying that only one item is in that issue. If I put drop the down arrow, I can see what that item is within the object tree. I can then also navigate that data. I can see what that data is, and also I can see the authoring tool ID within just the pop-up because it's one of our favorites. What I can also do is go to the top left, and I can see all the properties of that element from here. And I can see the authoring tool ID is 1467825. I can go back into my Excel and go to 1467825. 7825, click on that one, and then I'm just going to paste that link into the register. Now that link is going to be available to everyone on the project, the asset register. Whenever they click on it, it's going to take them straight to that issue. I'll do that one more time. So if I go into Revizto, I close down this issue, jump into the next one. I want to copy that link first. Go down to the drop arrow so I can explore that element. View it, 1467552. I can go back to the Excel. 146,552. Pop that down. Hit that, and then we've got both of them in there, and then we've got both those links. So another thing we can do, and I talked about the QR codes, is come in here, go back into the model itself, exit off this, and then if we click on these buttons, we can generate a QR code for this element. So I'm going to generate the QR code with a sticker, save that out, hit save. And now if we go back into my Excel and we go to that top item, which we know this QR code is for, I can then come in here, insert, we're going to go insert picture into cell, this device. We're going to go to our downloads and select the QR code. And if I pull this down now, that QR code is going to be available to anyone on the project. We can make this a bit smarter. Go up here, set this up, and then we've got the link and then the QR code. Now when we click on the link, it's going to open up on the web quickly, and then it's going to take us straight to that asset. If we go back to the Excel, open that up, try the other one, it's going to relocate us to that other asset in our asset register. So in the background, I've spent a bit of time of putting together examples of how you can take this a little bit further. Obviously, we've already created the asset register. We have those links to the model within Revizto, and we've got these issues and audit trail within Revizto too. We've also got the QR codes that we can use on the site app. We've got some search sets that we can use for the project if we want to find those specific items, and we can easily navigate the properties. What I'm going to show you is how we can start leveraging the issue tracker and these items within that issue tracker to start applying files that you might have specific for those HRUs, for example. So within here, if we scroll down to another one, we can go in and start attaching documents in here. If we go down to the little paperclip, we have the option to drop files, photos, 360 photos, and documents. Documents are specific to our integrations, such as SharePoint. So we could link directly from SharePoint a document that is being stored there instead of pulling a local version, which is what files is. We also have the option to attach a photo. If you open up this with the site app, it will just open up your camera on your on your phone, and you'll be able to take a photo and instantly link it into this chat log. We're just going to quickly click on files, and within files, I'm going to quickly find an O&M, and this one will do. And then it's going to add it here. I could then add another one if I wanted to. Click on it again, and go into O&Ms again, and let's just drop another O&M. Then we can add a comment underneath files, and then just send that through, and then just attach it directly to that asset. If we click on one of these now, this is just a template version. You can see we've got our own file viewer, so you can open up all your files from Revizto. This also works for that integration with something like SharePoint. You can just open up the files in the Revizto. It doesn't need to go externally. What else we can do in here is go into and change a few of the fields that we have. So we're going to go in and change status. We can change this to repaired, not functioning. And as before, this is actually being stored within Revizto, and this data can actually be leveraged and used for the dashboards. This is a very simple version of that. So in use, repaired, not functioning. We could use this for specific PPM, or we could also use this for reactive maintenance. Anyone on site could have access to the site app. When they see an issue, they can locate it within the model, create a stamp, and then also assign it to a specific person. And talking of assigns, so let's say we've got this fan coil unit for some reason is not functioning. When we go to not functioning, we could assign it to a specific person. So if we go down here, go to assignee, if there's someone in charge of maintenance, we could assign it to them as well. So in summary, Revizto and using an asset register really makes the process a lot smoother. Instead of just looking at a flat piece of paper, which is your asset register, you can start building out links to your model. The benefits of this is that you can easily attach documents to that asset. You can find it spatially. You can see the data related to it as well, if it's not captured in your asset register, and you have an audit trail of what's happened to that asset. This comes to the end of my webinar. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned a few things on the way. Feel free to reach out to me, as I'm always interested on how you're getting on with Revizto, some of the functions that you've used, and a lot of the time we learn just as much from our customers or new users as we do from each other. Thank you very much.